Breaking news are happening now.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Reality Flash. My name is Mike Bloom, and I'm here to bring you the flashiest breaking news in the wild world of reality TV. And today we've got quite the wild story for you as we take a look behind the scenes, seemingly for like the umpteenth time, at whatever is going on in the hot mess that is the Bachelor franchise. But of course, before we start, you know I would never be one to fish for likes. I am here for the right reasons for you. But I'm always fishing for subs and tips. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. Done a lot as of late, so I don't know what you're missing out on here at therealityflash.com. While you're there, any ratings, reviews, of course, greatly appreciated as this is still a relatively new podcast. We want to pop in the eyes, get the first impression rose, if you will, of a lot of people that are checking out this podcast for the first time. And if you spot any news out there in the reality TV world that you want me to cover, no spam, no solicitations, just tips at therealityflash.com. And speaking of tips, we're about to get into a litany of anonymous tips that have come in from a number of crew members from the Bachelor franchise in a very new expose that dropped on Deadline on Friday that takes aim at two of the current showrunners for allegedly creating a, quote, toxic and hostile work environment. And so it makes only all the sense in the world to bring on a veritable expert in the world of all things Bachelor mess to sort this latest mess out. Of course, one half of our intrepid duo covering all things Bachelor here on RHAP, 10 plus years going strong. It is Haley Strong. Hi, Haley.
Hi, Mike. I'm so used to talking to you about food that when you were asking for subs and likes, I was like, what kind of sub? Where are we getting a sub from? Yeah.
We're going Italian. We going how long will it keep? Well, we'll see how long this franchise might keep. And I will say, due to technical difficulties, if you're watching the video version of this, Haley was not able to use her camera, but it's also appropriate considering that we're about to talk about like a bunch of anonymous things that were said. So it's just you trying to embody all these very unfortunate crew members that have been working on this franchise.
Absolutely. And my name really should have been like question mark, question mark, question mark. But like I'm having too many tech issues that I'm not willing to we're in a delicate balance of things working right now.
Well, let's talk about a very different delicate balance because, yeah, this is something that I wouldn't even say serves as like the culmination of everything going on with The Bachelorette, which we can certainly get into. I know that you and Amy on your side of things had talked a bit about it as well, but certainly serves as the next point of maybe some are saying, the continual signs as to where the Bachelor franchise might be going in the United States. On Friday, Deadline came out with this article inside the toxic culture of the Bachelor franchise as crew deals with fallout of Bachelorette pause, extent of EP exits revealed. And so this is a piece that's sourced from a lot of anonymous producers and other crew members that have been working on the franchise, some of them for years, in fact, decades, that exposes a lot of what is allegedly going on behind the scenes, and namely taking aim at the two people that are currently showrunning the Bachelor franchise in the form of Claire Freeman and Bennett Graebner. And we're going to talk a little bit about everything that it gets into because it is a lot. And I think especially Haley to get sort of like your reactions to all of this and how it might play into not only the Bachelor franchise now, but possibly in the future. Before we get into the details, I just want to get your thoughts when this was sent your way. Was this a surprise to you from the Bachelor Nation perspective, which I'm not admittedly as tuned into as you are? Did this seem like something that was kind of par for the course with what people were kind of expecting was happening behind the scenes?
I'm not. I think that's hard, because this franchise has such a storied history, and it's had its fair share of scandals. And if The Bachelor's in the news, it's usually like not a good thing. It seems to be one of the franchises that it keeps having issues over and over and over again. A couple years ago, Mike Fleiss left, and we kind of all were hoping that would have like a renewed sense of vigor for the Bachelor franchise, with things that the audience is wanting and expecting, which is more diverse casting, body and race and like creed and everything like that. We expected that there would be that the leads and that the contestants would be safe, that they would have more stringent casting processes. And that is something we are finding that they have not been adhering to, especially in Jen's season. There was quite a few people who had like pretty bad stories about them and criminal records. And then even in Joan's season of The Golden Bachelorette, there's quite a few stories coming about some of the guys on that. So that has been disappointing. I had bigger hopes for it, I guess. And The Bachelorette going on pause is a shock, but it's not a surprise. I think we've been seeing a decrease in viewers of the franchise steadily since probably like 2021, probably 2020. Like, I feel like there was a real heyday there in like 2016 to 2019 where like you know, even a ton of podcasts were popping up. Right. Everyone is talking about it. People aren't watching it as much. They're disillusioned with the franchise. They keep the franchise is grasping at straws to like keep things going. But they're definitely struggling in a lot of ways, obviously.
Yeah, so let's get into this article, which was written by Peter White. I'll put it in the comments as well, because we are just going to skim the surface at a lot that is happening. So to give a bit of a background, Haley alluded to it before. So Mike Fleiss is someone that I think was helming the show. You know, he was a creator of the Bachelor franchise in the early 2000s that has obviously become like an empire, spawning multiple spin-offs, including The Bachelorette, including all these all international franchises. Mike Fleiss was dismissed from the show after an HR investigation about workplace misconduct. A lot to your point earlier, Haley, around a lot of the discriminatory practices that he was utilizing in his casting. And so in his place, there was kind of like this team that was put in. And the two that ended up surviving, I think it was like a three-headed, you know, team at first. And now it's under the guide of two people. So Claire Freeman was someone who specifically was like brought on around the time that Fleiss left. She had been working, Haley, in your neck of the woods. She had been doing the show running for The Bachelor Canada and Bachelor in Paradise Canada. And then Bennett Graebner was someone who had been involved with the show for, at that point, 15 years. He had been working on things since 2008. And the hope was that they would help kind of lead this new era of the show, right? That, to your point, there was a lot of stuff that was going around about kind of the optics that was going on with the show. But it's come a bit clear, I would imagine, especially over the course of the past year, that those issues are not completely fixed. And actually, this article starts off with a really interesting piece about how, you know, Jen Tran undergoes this incredibly, I would say, traumatizing situation in the finale of her season of The Bachelorette. And they tell the story about how, like, allegedly it was Claire's idea to have that be live and like get her reaction in an obviously incredibly distressing moment. And from what the article gets into, that almost seems like a microcosm of a lot of the larger issues that are at play with the two of them as showrunners.
Yeah, I think if anyone watched Jen's season, like that was just the whole thing from start to finish was an absolute like botch job, basically. Jen was never really their first choice, and they kind of made her know it. I think it always felt like the guys they cast were not expecting her to be the lead. And that was unfortunate. A lot of the like she was not treated well by many of the guys. And right at the end, you know, she proposed to Devin, and they showed that with her sitting there beside Devin. And like, I think that was a wild choice. I do think for the context of the show, sure, we get to see the proposal. I think that makes sense. I don't think it like was necessary for Jen to be sitting there watching it with her ex-fiance,
Mm.
like that was a completely unhinged choice. And like this is not the first unhinged choice this franchise has made to like further drama in a way that's not necessary. Like the show leads to drama in itself, and I almost feel like The Bachelor is kind of still stuck in like the early days of reality television, where
Mm.
it's like we have so much toxic drama, where all of reality TV has shifted away from that for the most part, like especially in like the competition realm. We find that contestants are nicer. They have like a better head on the fact that it's a game. I think maybe The Bachelor is very different because it's dealing with a more intimate emotion. Um, oh gosh, that it sucks that we thought things were gonna be better, but they're
Mhm.
just worse in a. They're just still bad in a different way.
Yes, so that's really what this article gets into, and as I mentioned before, it's that they sort of stem back to the fact that apparently in this moment when they're showing the proposal live, that all these crew members were protesting in the moment, like, "This is not the thing to do," but the opinion that won out, allegedly, was Freeland's, and to them, it sort of represents kind of the attitude that the 2 of them have had behind the scenes, which is a bit of like a my way or the highway, that as one person mentions, it was an environment that's, quote, incredibly hostile, toxic, and horrible. It's a dumpster fire right now. And throughout this article, they talk a lot about how the 2 of them kind of foster this like pseudo dictatorial environment of how, and again, this is all alleged, and there'll be a response from the council that we'll get into, but of this idea that like they are people who want the crew members, even some of the most senior people who outlasted their own tenure on the franchise, to like kind of stay in line with what they idealize for the show, how it should be run. There are allegations that, they do these sort of like mind games, like coming in late to every meeting because they want to keep people waiting, and how a lot of the decisions are actually made behind closed doors between the 2 of them. And so there's really no like collaboration or direction or a sense of unity that's going on behind the scenes. What was your take on all that, Haley?
I think that the truth definitely lies somewhere in the middle.
Mm.
I think that it's probably very true that it is like it's a hostile work environment. I wonder if there's also some truth that um people left over from the old guard, or like people who thought they were in line to get that position, or
Mm.
people who were kind of in line with Mike Fleiss, are like have issues with what's happening and wanted things to go their way. Like it feels like I don't want to make light of it, but it feels like very Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation, where
Mm.
it's like, okay, I'm seeing where both sides are coming from. Um, and I wish we were able to delve a bit deeper, I guess. Like it did feel a little surface level to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because these are all anonymous, and I wonder if they brought up like specific circumstances, like they would kind of out themselves identity wise, and
Sure.
especially as we'll get into at a time where production is kind of bleeding employment opportunities right now. But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that they talk about, in particular, there was one name that was named, which was Ken Fuchs, who was apparently this like veteran director of the show, directed hundreds of
Yeah.
episodes. He apparently has not been asked back to. There was some insiders with Warner Brothers TV who had said that like he will remain an active part of the franchise, but I think again, crew members are using that as like a representation of the fact that, okay, the people that have been helping this ship kind of run and stay afloat for the past decades are now being dismissed in favor of these 2 people that, according to them, are kind of like running things their own way in a way that's instilling a lot of fear and hostility amongst the people around them.
Yeah, and like it feels super sketchy that um somebody that was hired was Freeland's husband
Yeah.
and like her best bud. Like, yeah, like that sounds sketchy. That does sound sketchy.
Yeah. So There's a lot of quotes here to get into. They use an example of like on the first day of filming the season of The Bachelor with Joey last year, that like they made all the people on the staff wear name tags, which was like kind of a sign to the crew of like they don't know who we are, that they're largely kind of like off doing their own thing. Somebody accused them of like quote silent toxicity at the same time. I will also let me bring in actually because listen, anonymity is the name of the game when it comes to all this. But I did find it interesting that the Bachelor subreddit went into some of the comments on this deadline
Mhm.
article, and some people, at least allegedly, are part of the parties that are involved in all of this, and they wrote a couple of choice comments. So let me read these out loud. This one says, "This is incredibly validating. I was so excited to work on this series, only to find myself completely sidelined and unsure of my role. Eventually, I was told I didn't know how to do a job I had been successfully doing for nearly a decade. Whether intentional or not, I was on contact when someone mentioned in the article deliberately trying to get the star of the series to speak poorly about me. They then used that conversation as leverage to cut my contract early, only to dismiss it with a condescending "TV is hard" when I left. It's the most patronizing thing anyone's ever said to me. I'll never forget it. I'm genuinely thrilled to see these people finally being exposed." Let's see. This is another one that says, "Yeah, I was there for the meeting where Bennett said we are lucky to be working," as he was referencing a story in the trades about the state of our industry. Bennett also went on to say we're a wonderful crew and that he wanted the franchise to continue so that we can all still work and make great TV together. We also wore name tags, as I mentioned before. I have been with the show for 14 years and still don't know 80% of the names. I found that helpful. So there's a little bit of a vouching for that. Nicole Woods had been there since the beginning and also didn't know most of the crew's names. She was also widely disliked because of her signature Karen behavior and energy, often injecting herself into conversations that didn't involve her. People learned how to tolerate her by clearing an area whenever she entered a room. And that's another former, I wouldn't say like showrunner, but like an EP that was brought on that eventually left. Here's another anonymous one, as they know, not married to Claire, to your earlier point, saying, "Since you have complained about the fact checking, I'll jump in here. Bennett never went on to say, quote, we're a wonderful crew and that he wanted the franchise to continue so that we could all work together and make great TV together. He said we should be grateful to have work at all." There was an awkward, deafening silence following Bennett's threatening remarks. One of the directors had to chime in after to say something and complimented the crew to show some semblance of leadership, something the showrunners have failed to do, as is clear by the statements in this article. Had they added that they appreciated our hard work, that meeting would have been very different. People are rightfully disheartened by poor leadership. And I think that's what it comes down to, Haley, right? It's like, I think in the second half of this podcast, I'd love to get into your thoughts as to like, is this one of the many canaries in the coal mine as to the possible end of the franchise at large? But I think overall, no matter what it is a harbinger for, it just represents that it seems like behind the scenes there's just not a lot of faith in the leadership involved. And from what they are alleging, it also might be vice versa as well.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And it's just kind of, eh, yeah, it's obviously there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I think that this show just also has like an overarching culture of drama, and I think it probably bleeds into the actual production of it too, right? Like, I mean, it's been a while since it came out, but like the first couple seasons of Unreal, is kind of
Hmm.
based on like the background of or, like production of a Bachelor type show, and of course it was a dramatized fiction show, but I think it really got people thinking of like, oh, okay, like what's real here? Like what's unreal here?
Yeah, I will also read to kind of finish off this first part of the podcast a statement from Michael Weinstein, who's the counsel for Freeland and Graebner, that they told Deadline. He said, "My clients are well respected professionals with a long history in this business. They are frankly stunned and saddened by some of the things they are hearing now for the first time. To be clear, in the 2 years they have been running the Bachelor franchise, no one has ever complained to them or even implied that they were being anything other than professional. The fact is, they were tasked specifically to change the creative direction of the franchise. Change doesn't come easy." And as always, when there is change, some will be resistant and have a desire to return to old ways and old patterns. Clearly, some of these individuals have struggled to grasp this new direction and in the process have misinterpreted my client's good intentions. So that's kind of what you were referring to earlier, Haley, right? That like their side of the story is that it's the old guard kind of brumming up against maybe some of the changes that this, new showrunner group was a part of.
Yeah, I could see that being part of the case, along with the fact that their leadership style is not necessarily a healthy and positive one for the production. Like, I think both can be true and both should be like, I think the whole purpose of everything should just be moving towards a better and healthier environment for the contestants if the show is to continue. Like, I'm concerned about the contestants. I'm
Mm.
concerned about the production being able to like work in a healthy environment.
Well, we're going to get a bit more into how this translates for not only the present of the Bachelor franchise, but also the future. I will be back in a flash to get into all that with Haley Strong. All right, Haley. So part of this article also continues a sequence of kind of still confusing events that maybe I'm hoping you get to the bottom of alongside me, which is, as you mentioned before, the news that came out a couple weeks ago at this point, seemingly out of nowhere, at least from my perspective, about a pause in production for The Bachelorette. I think like since 2008, they have not missed a summer cycle. This is the first time that they are doing so. And it sounds like, from what some people are claiming in this article and in the comments as well, this was quite literally news to them when Deadline dropped that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. That, if you find out you're losing your job from a Deadline article. I think when the news came out, like we had some additional context to it where, like I said earlier, we were like shocked, but we weren't surprised because last year we skipped the Bachelor in Paradise season. That was the first time in a while we hadn't had it, like that it was their choice. Like there was obviously they skipped a cycle for COVID as well, but this was the first time they're like, we are not doing Bachelor in Paradise this year. We need a break from it. We're going to come back with it. Don't worry. And so when I heard this news, I kind of was like, oh, okay, that's kind of what they're going for with it. I also thought maybe with the addition of like the Golden Bachelor and Golden Bachelorette into the franchise that they're going to do a more cyclical schedule rather than have like two of their seasons running at once. In 2023, they had Bachelor in Paradise and Golden Bachelor like one after the other, like on a Tuesday night, you were watching one and then you were watching the other. And also the Bachelorette used to air between May and like July. And the last couple of years, it got shifted from like July till September, which was always interesting. So I was wondering if they were just kind of flipping the schedule and having Bachelor in Paradise be in its usual summer slot instead of the fall, like it kind of had been. It's also like precedented to have a Bachelorette season a little later in the year. We had Katie Thurston's season, and then we had Michelle's right after within the same calendar year. Hers was a little later because she didn't want to take a break from teaching to go film. So they filmed for her in the summer. And so they had a fall season of The Bachelorette as well. I also think that because they faced a lot of backlash for the way that Jen's season was cast, I thought they were maybe taking a beat and giving themselves more time to cast appropriately for whoever they chose the lead to be. And I still kind of like have some hope that that is possible, that maybe they're shifting the schedule a little bit and we're not going to have The Bachelor in January. Maybe that's going to be a little bit later. But this article coming out alongside that kind of makes me feel like they see the writing on the wall and that they're kind of slowing their roll a little bit. There's so many other romance shows out now. that have a better foothold. I mean, Love Island USA was such a mega hit this summer, and The Bachelor has just not been able to match that. I think they have alienated a lot of their audience who fairly are not willing to come back because they don't see enough change to make them willing to watch the show still, which that is so fair. It's so fair to have that opinion.
Yeah, so a lot to get into there, because Deadline sort of become like the reality Steve of this particular like series of Bachelor pieces of news, because I believe so they were, to the earlier point, like the first to report the news of the production pause on the 7th. Allegedly on the 12th is when there was a production meeting, and a lot of people who worked on the Bachelorette were informed that they would not be holding on to their jobs. That with production sort of like in this, it's tough. Like, do we call it a pause? Do we call it an indefinite hiatus? Let me actually start there with you, Haley. Like, let me get your temperature check. Is the Bachelorette canceled, in your opinion? Is this pause indefinite?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I tend to be naive about things though. So like if it was indefinite, I wouldn't be that surprised. I would be pretty sad. Like I always enjoy the Bachelorette seasons. This past Bachelorette season just left such a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Like it really did, and I think it soured a lot of people who were like, okay, I'm going to give this one more chance. And then they did that. And so it's like, well, why am I wasting my time? Why am I giving my views to a show that obviously does not care about their leads or their contestants in general? I can't blame people for like checking out of this franchise. I really can't.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we shall see. There's like no formal news. I mean, it's not great when, hundreds of people are suddenly out of work, and some are being shifted over. You mentioned Bachelor in Paradise. I think another reason why they kind of paused down is that I know they're coming back this summer with a new showrunner as well, and like actually like an entire new production team behind that. So there are some cases where like some people might be put on other series as well. I will say there's also been some speculation as to like what was going to be the case. I think there was like a podcast on Ashley I and Ben's podcast. They said Maria was the front runner to be the Bachelorette this year. Do you have some context for me as to who Maria is?
Sure. Okay, so on Joey's season, there's a woman named Maria, Canadian, and she really had quite a presence on that season. She could have easily been painted as a villain, but people got really behind Maria. And so she was somebody who everybody really wanted to be the Bachelorette when like leading up to Jen's season. So it was kind of Maria and Daisy. Those were like really two people that people were rooting for and that they probably were casting the show for. And Maria went on an episode of, I think it's Call Her Daddy. It's one of the ones. I mix that one up with Not Skinny but Not Fat or whatever. And then there's like another one that I confuse it with. So I do think it was whatever one I said it was. Call Her Daddy. And Maria basically went on and was like, yeah, I was obviously their pick. They wanted me, but I told them no. Like I was starting to like get into the process of like being cast as the lead. And then I told them no. So that's when they picked Jen. And like, obviously, I think that was when they were filming The Bachelorette. So Jen didn't really get that news until she came back. And she was obviously kind of hurt by it because her and Maria were friends enough. And it just kind of, there was just a lot of backlash towards Jen that was really unfair. Anyway, so then the news coming out like, oh, well, like Maria was their choice again as lead. And it's just, I could see that being the case, but I think it's too little too late. And I don't
interesting.
know. Like, I think that like people wouldn't care that much now if it was Maria. Also, I think she probably jerked them around again, saying like, yeah, I'll do this. No, I'm not going to do it.
And so that might have been like, I wouldn't say that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but it might have been a reason they're like, to your earlier point, if they're trying to take their time to like find the right people, that might not only just apply to the men, but also the lead as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I quite like the women on Grant's season.
Mm.
So I'm surprised that they try to go back to the Maria well, who I think I I think, like I said earlier, they're just trying to like make a controversial choice to get people to tune in by like choosing Maria, because she was very polarizing for sure. A lot of people really loved her, a lot of people really didn't like her.
All right.
Um
Well, I'm going to try to hold your feet to the fire again here, Haley, because, I have certainly read some discourse from fans looking at something like this, where, again, a lot of it is anonymized, but these are, pretty big remarks coming from those that are behind the scenes. What I do find interesting is like we are talking a couple days after this article came out. I have not seen really any like former contestants talk about this. Maybe they
yeah,
they might on like the next round of a podcast or anything. Do you think that's eventually coming?
I think it is from people like Nick Vile, maybe like an Ashley I, who's like not quite as in deep anymore
Mm,
with the franchise. Like they're not getting the call back as much. Um, I would highly doubt that any of the people who have been in the franchise probably since the changing of the guard are going to speak out, because they're probably still wanting to go on Bachelor in Paradise, wanting to get the phone call. Like they're not gonna like piss off anyone. They might still be under contract for a little bit too.
yeah, very true. So we will see. There might be more stuff to come, but let's try to take the temperature right now, Haley. Put that naivete to the test. So a lot of people are thinking that because a lot of this is publicized, and again, whether founded or not, a very scathing indictment of those that are currently running The Bachelor, that this is sort of like the big warning sign that ABC might be on its way out with all of this altogether. I mean, you talk about it, there's a huge number of dating shows. The Bachelor obviously really helped create a lot of this stuff, but I
But
think
it
it's,
never evolved in the way that any of the other shows did.
yeah,
Like
and
it
I,
was always very stuck in its way. And I think a lot of that was Mike Fleiss leading it.
mhm.
He like wasn't willing to get with the times. Um eh, and then so by the point that they were finally bringing in new people with fresh perspectives, it was just a little too, it was like too little too late.
Well, and I think especially like the big two romance shows that I can think of that have just definitely surpassed the Bachelor universe, I would say, in terms of like virality and water cooler moments are Love Island and also Love is Blind as
Yeah, for
well.
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that, there is also some thoughts about like, all right, has this kind of like seen its day? So give me your opinion, Haley. A, do you think that this means The Bachelor is done? And I guess B, in light of if these allegations are true, as much as you don't want to be out of a job, is this something that you would want to see sunset if indeed a lot of this stuff is happening?
I don't necessarily need the franchise to be over. I don't think like that's necessarily the right call. I do think obviously there is a lot more work to be done to have like a healthy workplace for
Mhm.
the people who are behind the scenes and the people who are in front of the cameras. And that is absolutely vital to having the franchise go on. And if they can't do those things, then well, like, sorry, Bachelor, you deserve to like go away.
Mm.
Right? Like if you're not willing to take care of the people who are creating the show, then what are we doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in a day and age, again, where there's plenty of stuff out there, do we necessarily need an environment that is so, like a Sue Sylvester means, so incredibly toxic
Yeah.
behind the scenes to produce some content that, to your point, even as of late, has produced, like, at best, mixed reactions sometimes?
Yeah, it's eh, n- everyone needs to be taken care of. And
Yeah.
that's obviously not happening.
Absolutely. Well, we shall see what is coming if, after the final rose is the final rose for the Bachelor franchise. We'll see, obviously, what is to come of, some people's responses to this article, whether there is more. I'm certainly going to be checking deadline to see if there's any more Bachelor stuff that is coming out of that, whether we're going to have some concrete answers as to what's going on with the Bachelorette. So a lot up in the air, but considering what just came out Friday, we wanted to get on the line here and talk about what we know so far and get our reactions. And Haley, thank you for being our guide, certainly my guide, definitely through all this news, the history, the past, present, and future. Very much appreciated. And of course, there is still Bachelor happening right now.
There's still Bachelor happening.
Yeah, so what do you want to plug for the listeners out there?
So if you happen to be watching The Bachelor, me and Amy are talking about it on the We Know Reality TV network under Talking Batch with Amy and Haley. We are going through every episode in the season. We are enjoying the season so far. It's definitely feeling odd. Like I feel like watching this season, having this news come out, you're like, okay, like it gives more context to what's happening. So yeah, check that out. And if you want to check out my Bookstagram account at The Strong Library, where I read and review books, check that out as well.
And of course, we are trying to be our own veritable library of reality TV news. This actually kicks off my third day in a row of Reality Flash podcast. If you missed it on Friday, I did a little bit of like a hodgepodge of news from around the reality TV world, of some controversy, some, speaking of romance, some possible, breakup stuff through social media. And then on Saturday, for Survivor fans, big announcement came out about Survivor 50 and a fan vote element for the first time in a production perspective. And so I talked about what you need to know about that. So if this is any indication, like, reality news can come at any point in time. And I try to get on the line as quickly as I can with experts like Haley to talk through everything that you need to know. So all that being said, definitely would love to hear from you all in the comments, especially those of you that are involved in Bachelor Nation. What is your reaction to this? Do you have any thoughts as to whether or not the Bachelorette will come back and prospectively why it may have happened? And is this a shape of things to possibly come down the line? Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments of this YouTube video, on social media, as well at a Mike Bloom type. And as always, if you have any news, be sure to send it my way. No solicitations, just tips at therealityflash.com. Give me all those tips, baby. I love getting a good tip in the morning. So any news that might be happening, because if this is any indication, there are certainly shows that I am not an expert on. So send stuff my way, and I'm more than happy to take a look at it and see if I can package it into the next episode of Reality Flash. And in general, subscribe, rate, review, please, would be greatly appreciated at therealityflash.com. And, I got to attend this the Survivor drop-in and screening event the other day, and it was so nice to be able to talk with people who had been checking out the Reality Flash, had been really enjoying it. I've been absolutely loving it as well, as we've kind of been building the plane as it flies. Turbulence might be on its way. You never know what happens in the world of reality TV, but I'm happy to be piloting this thing right here, right now. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Reality Flash. Haley, thank you so much again for coming on and offering your insights. I'll be back in your eyes and ears soon with more reality TV news that you need to know as it breaks. Thank you all again so much for listening. Until next time, you've just been flashed.